Hello and welcome to AgriRiches TV, where we bring you documentaries, where we also bring interviews with agribusiness giants. And today we are going to be spending time with an agribusiness giant in the agriculture sector, but more specifically, we are going to delve into climate change. Today we are going to be looking at how climate change is affecting agriculture and its adverse effects that it is having on agriculture. And global leaders out there are meeting to find out ways to mitigate the impact of climate change. Today at the University of Ghana, I'm at the Center for Climate Change and Sustainability Studies to speak with a research fellow here at the center. So I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Yao Ajiman Boafo, who happens to be a research fellow here. But before then, I would like to say that we are proudly sponsored by TIAS Group, an agricultural industrialization company that is committed to promoting and adding value to agriculture. So as an investor, if you want to own an agro-processing factory, kindly call the number beneath the screen. All right, so let's go for a short break. We'll be right back with more.
Want to own an agro-processing factory, but held by financial and technical challenges? TIAS got you covered. We assured of 80% financial support. You only need an investment of 20%. Aside that, you get technical support, ranging from machine design, manufacturing to installation, with a guaranteed offtake support. Own a factory today. TIAS Group, more value for agriculture.
So welcome back from the short breather. Today we are going to be speaking with Dr. Yao Ajiman Boafo. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you guys here.
Yeah, so with your profile you've been in this field for over 10 years now.
Yes.
And then you've been conducting research in the climate change field. And Africa happens to be one of the continents that is really being hit hard by climate change. Yeah. So tell us, what's the recent information on climate change?
All right. Thank you very much, Prince, for the opportunity. And it's always nice to get this opportunity to share some insights on climate change with people. But as you rightly pointed out, the African continent, and for that matter, Ghana, is known to be one of the countries that is facing the severest impact of climate change. And in the most recent publication by the Intergovernmental Platform on Climate Change, which is called the IPCC, the Sixth Assessment Report, they actually re-echoed the current state of the global climate and what that really means for our lives. You understand that our whole life revolves around the state of the climate. So anytime there's a minor change in the conditions of the climate, it also affects everything that we do.
Okay.
And in the last report that IPCC put out, it made it clear that the current change that we are experiencing is caused by human activities. So what it means is that fundamental issues like, more floods, more heat wave, more drought, and in many parts of the world where there's heat wave, like even in Europe, is because of the activities of humans over the last 200, 300 years that have led to the more emissions into the atmosphere. So it means that we are having more carbon dioxide, we're having more methane, more water vapor, and these are contributing to the change that we are experiencing now in every part of the world. So there's more warming happening. And the warming is causing more disruption all over the world. And I think if you follow the news, even beyond Ghana, almost every month, there's stories of extreme floods. These were not common, some years ago, and it's even more regular now. So these are some of the, issues that are popping up. And then the evidence is being also put out there to show that one thing that is important for us to also appreciate is that climate change is an evolving issue. So almost on a yearly basis, we are getting more information, more accurate data on what the impacts are likely to be. But what I think should be of interest to everybody is the fact that the change in our climate as we're experiencing now is likely to get worse, unfortunately. And so it requires that as humans or as people, we begin to look at development that is climate friendly. And that, I think, is one of the key reasons why the agricultural sector is also an important sector for us to explore.
But I think Africa is now trying to be more industrial.
Yes.
So this African continent, we don't produce much gas, we don't contribute much to the climate change. So why we've been the continent has mostly to be hit hard?
Well, I think there's a number of factors, and you're right. In many parts of Africa, we are trying to industrialize, we're trying to build more factories, so that we can be better off economically, socially, which is true. But the thing about climate change is that the impact have no boundaries. So in the early 1800s, when the Industrial Revolution started in Europe, going to America, where they did a lot of manufacturing, and they led to the emission of several what we call gases, greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. That has already changed or altered the global climate.
Okay.
So, for instance, there's a term that we use to talk about the quantity of what we call carbon dioxide in the atmosphere called parts per million. So, as we speak now, we have more than 400 million parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which, from the scientific perspective, is damaging to our climate.
Okay.
So, even though Africa is not adding more to the the change that we experience, it's important for her to start or develop based on what we call climate smart approaches. So, because the impact, as I'm saying, is still going to come. So, if you tell me that because you did not add a lot of gas into the atmosphere, you're not going to, develop in a way that is going to be less harmful, then we are all going to have the impact. Because when there's a change in climate, let's say in Ghana, it affects farming, it affects different livelihoods, and people will then begin to migrate to other parts of the world. So, it's still our duty to ensure that we look at climate-friendly development approaches or manufacturing approaches to minimize the impact that it will have on everybody within the country.
So we'll be speaking to Dr. Yao Ajiman Boafo, who happens to be a research fellow here at the Center for Climate Change and Sustainability Studies. And we've seen that human activities also contribute to the change in climate, and even for our agricultural practices, the slash and burn and all that, the use of fertilizers, okay, the use of chemicals in our farming systems also contribute to the changing climate. So we're going to Doc to find out more. Doc, so aside the deforestation, as you rightly mentioned, what are some of the human activities that you can say contribute?
Okay, good. Thank you very much. So I have to state that the whole idea of the process revolves around the fact that in almost every aspect of our lives, either at the domestic or industrial level, we are burning what we call fossil fuels. And fossil fuels comes in the form of coal, oil, and these are, and also carbon dioxide. These are different kinds of fuels that are used in different parts of our lives daily. So right from, transportation, everyday transport, from using your car, going to the office, to even, cooking in your house, to, let's say, powering any equipment at all that you have.
Okay.
It's also, these are all some of the basic things that causes, more emissions into the atmosphere than eventually. So, in fact, every bit of our life, which revolves around using of energy and power that is coming from different sources, are all contributing to climate change. In addition to, like I said, what we talked about, if agriculture, cutting down of trees, any kind of pollution, if you're doing a lot of burning, for instance, if you look at what happens in agriculture, for instance, it is one of the major causes of, air pollution within the environment. If you're producing food in a factory, it's also leading to the emissions of different kinds of gases. So all industrial activities contribute to climate change. Household activities, maybe one simple issue. Anytime we cook our food, we are in many ways also contributing to climate change through emissions. And the sad part of it is that when you cook the food and you don't eat it and you throw it away, it's also a contributor to climate change, because a lot of the food that is thrown away leads to what we call generation of methane. Methane is one of the strong greenhouse gases that is causing a lot of harm to the environment. So throwing away food and all the ways that is coming in is a major concern. So in summary, we are looking at both industrial activities and household or homemade activities on a daily basis what are contributing to climate change.
Okay. So to you, what are some of the possible solutions, or what do you tell the government? Is the government actually, can the government do something in this?
Obviously, I mean, the government is the leader or where the buck stops. The government is supposed to be driving policy, and I think it's doing that. It's all the truth. The government has been putting in place different kinds of policies or actions to be able to ensure that we mitigate or we adapt. And as you know, when it comes to mitigation, means that what are some of the things that we would do to ensure that we don't emit many more or a lot more greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. So, and then our adaptation means that there are certain things that we can't do anymore, but the rains will come.
Okay.
The drought will come. When it comes, what can we do? So what kind of infrastructure are we putting in place to ensure that we're able to deal with the impact of flooding? So back to your question of government, the government, yes, I think it can do more, but it's not just the government's, effort.
Okay.
When it comes to climate change, it requires everybody's effort. And so as much as the government is putting together policies to deal with with flooding or maybe creating more gutters, it also requires that people don't dump, waste in gutters. Because I don't know, when the rains come heavily and you dump a lot of things in the gutters, it will affect you. So at the household level, I'll say that at the household level, individually, we have a role to play. So, for instance, there's one policy that the government did, the bus rapid transit system within the city, which was meant to ensure that we transport many people to places within, a very good spot. But that hasn't worked. But that's one approach that the government, for instance, does to ensure that, so that not everybody buys a car, everybody's in the same car, reduces the amount of people. So that is happening. The government has put in place what we call climate smart agriculture policy. But one of the biggest challenges we face is financing when it comes to dealing with or addressing climate change. But I believe that your team will also talk about that at some point. But financing is a big challenge because you need money to invest in different projects or different interventions. But one thing that I keep talking about is that if we as individuals come to appreciate what climate change really is and how it impacts our lives, then it becomes our duty to also act in small ways to be able to deal with the impact. When it comes to household level, acting in small ways, like for instance, we're saying that don't put too many lights on in the house because that's energy consumption. When you are cooking, make sure that you limit the time that maybe sometimes you cook on another thing, and sometimes too when we look at in our homes, if we have some good amount of greens or trees, it helps because when it comes to heat, extreme heat, it can cause health issues. So when people build and they don't have green areas, it's not a good thing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we look at how individually we can play different roles in contributing to the mitigation and adaptation agenda, which is the core of the discussion around climate change.
Climate change, or the first posed by it. All right, so we're going to be taking the last or the final words from Doc on climate change and agriculture. What are the final words for us and for those watching you?
Okay, I think it's become increasingly clear that climate change is continually going to impact on agriculture. So the question is, what do we do? And one of the things that we talk about is what we call climate smart agriculture practices. Let's move away from the very traditional old approach of farming where we go and cut a huge area of land, then we destroy every vegetation of it, and then add fertilizer, and then but there's certain smart practices that we call tillage system where you can decide to plant in an area, even a small area, and find a way to till the land to ensure that you don't overly destroy the land and all the biodiversity that is on the land, instead of relying a lot on what we call the inorganic fertilizer. You can create your own sort of compost, organic fertilizer from homemade products, or you can also use even some of the waste that you generate from the farm to fertilize the soil. So we have to use we have to use less chemicals in our farming processes. It's important that we do that. And again, we don't necessarily also need to do too much what we call plantation agriculture, because that has huge impact on the land. So I think what we have to do now is to look at also a system whereby we can harvest water for our farming, because increasingly there'll be more irregular rainfall. So how can we promote proper irrigation systems even in smallholder farming spaces? One example I can point out for you is if you go to the Keta area where farmers do a lot of shallot farms and stuff like that. They've been doing this traditional practice of irrigation, using water from the center for so long, and I think it works for them. So I think such an example can be learned in many other parts of the country where water is a real challenge, and then so if they have underground water and be able to use it to irrigate the farms, they can be helpful, because agriculture remains an important part of our lives. We will continue to do that. But one point that also is the fact that agriculture is not just happening in rural areas. We can also do agriculture in urban areas. We can do small-scale agriculture, even in our homes, backyard gardening. They will provide alternatives for vegetables, food that you don't need to go and buy in the market. So let's think of it as an opportunity to now innovate within the context of agriculture, because rural lands are increasingly being lost, being expanded. And then how can you also grow simple crops in your homes to ensure that you have access to basic food that you need?
This is a situation where we have a lot of youths shying away from agriculture.
Well, I think they need. There are several factors that can, drive the youth to go into agriculture because already there are many challenges that the sector is facing. Apart from financing, apart from marketing challenges, climate change has become an added challenge because if you invest your money in agriculture and everything dies or you don't have any yield because of drought or because of floods, it's not a good thing.
It's not a good thing.
So you need to first of all bring together what we call an integrated system of saying that if the youth want to go into agriculture, there's some sort of financial support, there's some sort of education on climate change, or we have some other kind of support that will allow them to benefit from what they're doing. There's a good market for their products. There are several situations where farmers have had, harvested several tons of crops, of maize, but at the end of the day, they don't get the market for it because the system is not properly regulated, and then they all get rotten. So this is what I think needs to be done. There has to be a proper way to collaborate and ensure that you get interested in it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Doc.
Thank you
for having us here.
Thank you, Prince.
Wish you more prosperity in whatever you are doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I wish you guys well as well.
Thank you very much.
All right.
So I'll be speaking with Dr. Yao Ajiman Boafo, a research fellow at the Center for Climate Change and Sustainability Studies. And we've been talking about climate change and its impact on agriculture. So we'll be coming your way next week, on time with Agribusiness Giants here on AgriRiches TV. But remember that AgriRiches is on all social media platforms. So just go to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and follow AgriRiches. Thank you very much. Meet you same time next week. My name is Prince Opoku Dogbe.